Thank you for joining us on This Week in Turkey. I am Murat, Türsan. Tonight, Greece and Turkey are locked in yet another crisis, but this one threatens to turn hot. Former Diplomat and Medyacope contributor Selim Kuneralp will be with us to break it down. In other news, Medyascope gets the word on the street about the upcoming presidential election. There is a little bit of drama in the opposition coalition, and we will have the latest numbers on the economy. Spoiler, they're not great. But our main story tonight, President Erdogan ups the already serious tensions between Greece and Turkey, but this time we may do well to take it seriously. In a technology and defense expo this week, President Erdogan said a few words that can very easily be interpreted as him straight up threatening to invade Greece. And it wasn't just a slip of the tongue either, because he was asked about his statements later, and he doubled down using the exact same phrases. This is all coming after just another routine tiff between Turkey and Greece. The Turkish side alleges that Greek S-300 surface-to-air missiles locked onto a sortie of Turkish F-16s late last month while conducting an exercise flight. Now, we should make a caveat. The details of the story are fuzzy because both sides have different versions, and the Greek side is outright denying it ever happened. Which is important because scanning a target with a radar is one thing, but getting a firing solution on that target is a very clear act of hostility. And modern planes have the necessary equipment on board to tell the difference. We're not sure who's right in this story thus far, but we know for sure that President Erdogan's rhetoric is getting more and more heated. It is difficult to recall any other time in modern Turco-Greek relations that a head of a state has threatened to invade the other. We will ask Mr. Kuneralp if this is just red meat for President Erdogan's base, or does he actually mean it? But here are the details first.
President Erdogan attended Turkey's largest aerospace and technology expo in Samsun province last week, where he gave a speech that caused yet another crisis between Greece and Turkey. Greek, be mindful of history. If you push any further, there will be a heavy price to pay. When the hour comes, we will do what is necessary. One night, we can come over there without notice. What led President Erdogan to threaten Greece was Turkey's allegations of Greek S-300 surface-to-air missile batteries on the island of Crete, locking onto nearby Turkish F-16s in late August, an act of hostility under the NATO rules of engagement. Greece quickly denied the allegations and assured that its S-300s had never locked on to Turkish F-16s. Turkey has long protested the militarization of eastern Greek islands and considers it a violation of the Lausanne Treaty. During his visit to Bosnia and Herzegovina this week, President Erdogan was asked if he planned a military conflict with Greece and responded, "What I am talking about is not some sort of dream. One night, we can't come over there without notice." Why? Because they have these islands and they are militarizing these islands. They should know, if these illegitimate threats continue, our patience has its limits. The Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded to President Erdogan saying, "Greece will not join Turkey in the slide containing outrageous and beyond all limits remarks and threats taking place on a daily basis. We will immediately inform our allies and partners regarding the content of the provocative statements of the last few days." Greek authorities followed up by launching an official complaint with the UN and NATO regarding the rhetoric. The U.S. State Department responded to the crisis by saying, "The sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries must be respected and protected. Greece's sovereignty over these islands is not disputed. We call on all parties to refrain from rhetoric and actions that could further escalate tensions."
Back with us on the program, Selim Kuneralp. Mr. Kuneralp, it's always a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
It's all mutual. Now, sir, I think we're going to be talking about something less jovial, however. Let's start with the news of the week. President Erdogan has transitioned into a rhetoric that is perhaps unprecedented. His exact words were, one night we can come there without notice. seemingly threatening to invade another full-fledged NATO member. Now, first, let's get a little background from you. Sure, there have been multitudes of crises between Turkey and Greece in the past, but can you recall any instance where a head of a state used this kind of rhetoric?
Well, certainly not. I mean, as you know very well, Murat, Turkey and Greece have been quarreling, arguing over the Aegean Sea, different aspects of the issue, continental shelf, the breadth of the continental shelf, the delimitation of the territorial waters, demilitarization of the islands. All these issues have been the subject of quarrels, arguments for easily 40 years now, since the 1970s. Turkey and Greece have come to the brink of war several times, in the 1970s, in the 1980s, 1990s, and each time, of course, there has been an intervention, generally from the United States, to prevent the situation from deteriorating completely, and from both sides to fight it out. And I remember, for instance, in the 1990s, when there was a dispute over some uninhabited rocks, not very far from Bodrum, where I am now, called Kardak or Imya in Greek, and there was first Greek ships that landed on these rocks, and Turkish troops that landed on the same rocks, and so the two countries almost came to blows. But the United States intervened, and it basically gave out the message: whoever shoots first will find me in front of them. So that was a warning addressed to both countries, not to start a shooting war, and it was very effective. And both sides withdrew, and the islets are left, I think, to goats and donkeys and maybe some other animals. And over the years, this Kardak problem has spawned some other issues. Turkey has started arguing that many of the uninhabited, or indeed some inhabited islands and islets in the Aegean Sea, their ownership had not been decided at the Lausanne Treaty of 1923 between Greece and Turkey. So it started making claims about them, and Greece refused this, and saying that this is an issue that had been settled, and so there were negotiations that went on and on and on without any result. But as you say, Turkey in the past always avoided the accusation of being provocative and using threatening language, because of course there's immediately a reaction from third parties. This policy now seems to have been abandoned, as you pointed out, and some rather threatening language has been used, not just once, but repeatedly. And it has had the predictable effect of playing into the hands of the Greek government. So we first had a reaction from the European Union, saying that they disapproved of threats on the territorial integrity of Greece. The French foreign minister, who was first in Ankara and then in Athens last week, said words to the same effect. Then the US State Department said things like that, and this is exactly the kind of situation that Turkey tried in the past to avoid, finding itself, arguing not just with Greece, but with countries that supported Greece, and so it's rather surprising, I would say, that this has been done recently, and of course nobody believes that there will be a shooting war. I don't think that either Greece or Turkey would envisage anything like that. But Greece, of course, uses this situation for its own domestic purposes, and as I just said, to gather support from outside parties. So I find the whole thing very regrettable. I don't know whether Turkish public opinion is swayed by this, and whether it likes to hear this rather militaristic language. Whether public opinion enjoys, hearing this kind of wording. That I don't really know. But I don't think that if the objective is to find a solution to problems in the agency, I don't think that this is quite the right approach.
I see, sir. Now, sorry. You've said that Greece has used this for domestic purposes. I'm assuming political purposes. Let's expand on that a little bit, if you don't mind. Now, the more optimistic of us may assume that President Erdogan is just putting on a show for his nationalist voter base. Now, historically, President Erdogan has performed best in the polls when he has stirred up tensions with other countries. He gets that wartime president boost, and the nation rallies behind him, it appears. And since President is behind in the polls right now, do you think that this is just grandstanding, or should we be taking him a little more seriously?
Well, as I said, there have been crises at regular intervals over the past 40 years. I can remember at least three serious crises in the 1970s, when the problem went all the way to the Security Council of the United Nations. Then in the 1980s and 1990s, when the Americans intervened quite firmly and made it clear they could certainly not allow a shooting war. So I don't think that anybody in Turkey seriously envisages fighting it out, sending troops to the islands or anything like that. I live in Bodrum at the moment. As you know, I do not ski, and some of these Greek islands are extremely close. Kos and Kalimnos and Leros and others further up the coast. There's a lot of tourism going on between the two sides. You get these cruise ships traveling between Rhodes and Bodrum and other ports, and coming and going all the time. There is no atmosphere of kind of tension or anything like that. Everybody is going about their usual business. So it's all a war of words. As you mentioned, I think that Greece is also quite happy for perhaps the domestic political problems. Prime Minister Mitsotakis is in trouble because of an illicit listening scandal that had been conducted by the Secret Service and on Greek politicians in the European Parliament and elsewhere, and this has suddenly blown up, and it is very embarrassing for him. So I'm sure that he likes this kind of offer on the silver plate that has come from President Erdogan, because it enables him to change the subject. So I don't know what the purpose of the Turkish authorities, starting with President Erdogan, was in launching this war of words. But it seems, as often happens in these situations, that the main beneficiary is the Greek government. Mm-hmm. So if that was the purpose, well, that certainly that purpose has been achieved.
All right. Well, that's a little bit load off my mind as I am going to Cyprus next week, which I'll be off. So, sir, finally, let's, I know this is speculative, but let's rely on your experience. Should President Erdogan continue these tensions and this rhetoric, does Turkey actually stand to pay a price on the world stage? Because there have been multiple complaints filed. And as you said, the United Nations and the United States has responded to this rhetoric. If this continues, will there be actual consequences for Turkey? What do you expect?
There would not be any consequences unless sort of real action is taken, but namely, military action. But as I said, nobody expects it to be taken. You will hear the kind of language that has been heard in the last 10 days or so from the French, the European Union, the Americans, maybe some others that I'm not aware of. There must be a number of countries which quietly pass on the message to the Turkish authorities in Ankara that this is not a very wise approach. The worst thing that can happen is that, as happened in the 1970s, the United Nations or anybody calls on Turkey and Greece to negotiate a solution to these problems. And if this was said already 50 years ago, almost, that if negotiations do not produce a solution, then some kind of arbitration mechanism be adopted, like the International Court of Justice or some court of arbitration, ad hoc court of arbitration, that the two sides take these problems. For instance, if we're talking about rocks and islands that Turkey feels, whose ownership Turkey feels has not been decided at the Lausanne Treaty, well, maybe the International Court of Justice could issue an opinion on the relevant articles of the Lausanne Treaty, which are interpreted differently by Greece and by Turkey. So at the end of the day, I would expect somebody, whether it's the United States or the United Nations, to say something like that. The European Union has been saying it for many, many years now. I do not anticipate anything further than that, unless military action is taken, which, as I said, is extremely unlikely.
I see. So, not to worry. Greece and Turkey do this all the time. They threaten war, but it's just cats and dogs. It's the regular goings-on of Greco-Turkish relations. Mr. Kuneralp, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for being able to join us tonight.
Well, thank you for having invited me, and have a good trip to Cyprus.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And segueing into politics, if you know a little bit about Turkey, you've probably heard of the name Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. If you haven't, the short version is he is the head of the main opposition party, CHP. And he's assumed to be the candidate to run against Erdogan in the elections in just a few months. Matter of fact, Kılıçdaroğlu just announced this week that he would be ready to accept the candidacy should the coalition nominate him. There is just a little problem with that, however. Kılıçdaroğlu is often thought to have electability problems. People are certainly split on his candidacy. Some say yes, some say no, some say I'll vote for him, but I'd really rather like to have somebody else. Poll aggregates are pretty much all over the place. In some polls, Kılıçdaroğlu is dead last in all potential opposition candidates to run against Erdogan, but in many of them, he ekes out a very slight victory, but slight enough to call it a statistical tie. But are voters ready for Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu? Well, Medyascope went down to one of CHP's strongholds to see what the word on the street is. Let's go to that video.
I'm here at Beşiktaş, a central district of Istanbul and one of CHP's strongholds. CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu said that he was ready to run for president should the coalition nominate him. We are here to ask if people here would support Kılıçdaroğlu if he were to officially run on the opposition's ticket. This is what they have to say.
Bir değişik birisi olsun isterim yani.
Sizce kazanabilir mi?
Onu Allah bilir, ben de diyeyim mi şimdi?
Ya Ekrem İmamoğlu, Mansur Yavaş'ı da tartışıyorlar mesela. Ekrem İmamoğlu ve Mansur Yavaş'ı mı tercih edersiniz yoksa Kılıçdaroğlu'nu mu?
Valla ben esasında Kılıçdaroğlu'nu tercih ederim yani. Çünkü yani daha Müslüman, daha bazı şeyleri o açık açık söylüyor. Bir de bir başkası gelsin yönetsin ya. Hep aynı kişiler.
Gitmek ister misiniz? Hazır mısınız Kılıçdaroğlu'na adaylık?
Evet hazırım ya.
Kazanabilir mi sizce seçimi?
İnşallah.
Diğer konuşulan iki isim biliyorsunuz. Ekrem İmamoğlu ve Mansur Yavaş.
Evet.
Onlardan daha mı önde görüyorsunuz Kılıçdaroğlu'nu?
Onlara da şans tanıyorum ben. Yani benim için aynı ikisi de.
Bir aday seçme şansınız olsa kim olurdu?
İmamoğlu.
Kılıçdaroğlu girerse adayla yarı yolda kalır. Lastiği patlar.
Siz destekler misiniz Kılıçdaroğlu'nu?
Ben Mansur'dan başkasını desteklerim. 71 yaşına gelmiş. Karşısında Mansur var. Karşısında Ekrem var yani kendi adamları ama Mansur'dan başkası da Tayyip'e rakip olamaz.
Vallahi bana göre en iyi aday Kılıçdaroğlu.
Destekler misiniz?
Tabii.
Altılı masa mı adayı belirlemeli yoksa halk mı belirlemeli?
Bana göre halk belirler.
Kılıçdaroğlu'yla olacak iş değil bu.
Kazanabilir mi sizce?
Kılıçdaroğlu girerse sanmıyorum. Bence kazanamaz.
Oy verir misiniz Kılıçdaroğlu'na?
Vermem. Diyene de vermeyi düşünmüyoruz ama ne yapacağız bilemiyoruz böyle.
Yani ben Mansur Yavaş'ın gelmesine daha yanayım.
Neden?
Yani çalışmalarını daha çok beğeniyorum. Kankamın düşüncesindeyim.
Peki Kılıçdaroğlu kaybedebilir mi sizce?
Yani %85 kaybeder.
Peki Kılıçdaroğlu aday olursa destekler misin?
Yani mecburen destekleyeceğiz yani bir şeylerin değişmesi için.
Diyorum ya 20 yıldır muhalefetin başında çocuk yok. Diğerlerini onu kötülüyor. O yani iktidar da gitsin. Kılıçdaroğlu da gitsin. Adam gibi adam gelsin. Yönetir Türkiye'yi.
Mansur Yavaş'la Ekrem İmamoğlu hakkında ne düşünüyorsun?
İkisinin hakkında bir şey düşünemiyorum ama bilemeyeceğim yani Mansur Yavaş olur.
Kılıçdaroğlu bence uygun bir aday olarak çıkarsa kaybedeceğini düşünüyorum ben şahsen. Alacağı oylar ve nitekim tahminimi söylersem de kazanamaz.
Kılıçdaroğlu'nun adaylığına hazır mısınız?
Vallahi o hazırsa biz de hazırız.
Sizce aday olmalı mı olmamalı mı?
Olmalı.
Neden?
Dürüstlüğünden. Benim için yeryüzünde her şeyden önce dürüstlük. Çok dürüst bir adam. Devletime, ulusuma, halkıma, herkese eşit şartlarda davranan, eşitliğe inanan insan benim için çok önemli. Ben Atatürk ve Cumhuriyet kadınıyım.
Bence olmamalı. Olmamalı. Bence olmamalı. Neden?
Bir tane seçim kazanamadı. Bunu da kazanamaz. Mahcup eder bizi reisi.
Altı kişiyi de
Adam gibi biri gelsin. Ne bileyim yani adam gibi derken de kimdir o adam? Ama o adam bence bu adam değil yani.
Şimdi kendisi parti lideri olduğu için kendisine karar verirse o.
asla hazır yani kendini hazır hissetse bile bu millet hazır değil. Asla oy vermeyiz. Mümkün değil böyle bir şey. Yani kimse kusura bakmasın ama yani bu Cumhurbaşkanlığı Kılıçdaroğlu'na mı kaldı? Biraz gençlerin önüne açıversinler. Özellikle Gürsel Tekin'in dün yapmış olduğu PKK ile ilgili HDP'yi bakanlık veririz yaptığı açıklamayla ilgili o şey yaptıktan sonra kellemizi veririz gene oy vermeyiz ona.
Olmasın abi. Neden?
Olmasın abi, istemiyorum ben abi.
Kazanamaz diye.
Evet, kazanamaz. Olmalı, yakışır.
Neden?
Ben Kemal Bey'i çok beğeniyorum. Kişiliği, yani halktan biri en azından. Yani biz neysek o da aynı şekilde. Diğerleri gibi değil diyeyim ben size. Ben kendime yakın gördüğüm için isterim yani kendisinin aday olmasını.
Ben annem de CHP'li, ben de CHP'liyim ama bu Kılıçdaroğlu alamaz, o dediğimiz kişi o alır. Başka kimse alamaz yani.
Kim alır?
Ankara işçisi
Mansur Yavaş.
Mansur Yavaş.
Siz beğeniyorsunuz.
Beğeniyorum abi.
Kılıçdaroğlu peki beğenmiyor musunuz yoksa kazanamaz diye?
Kazanamaz.
Ama normalde hani beğenir misiniz?
Beğenirim ben ona şeye karşı çıkan Cumhurbaşkanı'na karşı çıkan o başka kimse değil.
Tercihim daha başkasında ama onu seçmektense Kılıçdaroğlu'na hazırım.
Hayır. Adaylığına hayır değilim ben. Bu aday da olamaz yani. Mümkün değil yani. Bu memleketi de yürütemez. Hiç yürütemez yani. Bu iki koyunu güdemez ya.
Hazırım. Görmeyi de çok isterim. Çünkü onu tutuyorum.
Hazırım. Sırf Alevi diye oy vermiyorlar. Buradan halka sesleniyorum. Lütfen Kılıçdaroğlu'na oy verin. Türkiye düzelsin.
Ben HDP'liyim. Parti ne karar verirse ona göre hareket ederiz. Hazır olabilirim. Başarılar diliyorum.
And continuing on with politics, looks like there is a little bit of a crack in the opposition this week. The opposition coalition, it is made up of 6 parties that are very unlikely bedfellows. Now, the driving engine behind the coalition is CHP as the party with the most vote share. But then you have E-Party in the second place as the second largest. And they are very much ideologically distinct. E-Party is what you could call a new age nationalist party. Secular, but right-wing. And it's headed by Meral Akşener, what many call Turkey's Iron Lady. But there was a little bit of a rift in the group this week when CHP's General Secretary floated the idea that when CHP comes to power, they may appoint ministers from the pro-Kurdish HDP party, implying that there could be another seat at the coalition table for them. And old national habits come rushing back. E-Party chiefs started railing against the very idea of letting HDP in, namely because nationalists in Turkey have long held the belief that HDP has ties to PKK, a Kurdish militant separatist group, widely considered a terrorist organization. But fear not, because Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu comes in to quell the flame, saying something to the effect of, we don't have to like each other, but we all have to live together. Not certain if that will work, but here are the details.
A serious rift occurred in the opposition coalition this week when CHP's General Secretary Gürsel Tekin responded positively when asked if CHP would consider appointing ministers from HDP if elected, implying that HDP could take part in the opposition coalition. HDP is a pro-Kurdish party with a majority of its support coming from Turkey's most prominent ethnic minority. It has often been accused of being in league with Kurdish militant organizations such as PKK by Turkey's right-wing parties, notably by the ruling coalition partner MHP. But criticism this time came from inside the opposition, namely E-Party. E-Party is a center-right nationalist party under the leadership of Meral Akşener and a member of the 6-party opposition coalition, composed of center-left CHP, center-right Democrat, DEVA and Future parties, and right-wing Felicity Party. E-Party's Istanbul chief, Burak Kavuncu, criticized Tekin, saying, "Our party chair, Meral Akşener, has already talked about this. It's already set who's in the opposition coalition." E-Party MP Yavuz Aralioğlu said, "We will never be comrades with a party that will not sever its connections with terrorist organizations." On a television program, Akşener said, "We have never mandated what relationships the coalition member party could establish, and in turn, everyone must respect our relationship with other parties." In response to the fire from E-Party, HDP spokesperson Ebru Günay responded to Akşener saying, "No HDP member would sit at the same table as you." Meanwhile, CHP's chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu attempted to calm tensions between the parties in a speech he gave at a rally in the capital Ankara, saying, "We are a coalition of 6, but we want to live together and embrace one another. We are trying to build a nation where 85 million citizens will live in harmony."
Bu ülkede herkesin 85 milyon insanın.
And in the economy, no news is good news. Unfortunately, there is news, because this is Turkey. The Turkish Statistical Institute just released inflation numbers for August, and they are now topping 80%. But, much like always, the independent inflation research group ENAG says you better put a 1 in front of that number because they are logging over 180% this month. As per usual, the two numbers disagree. There is a wide lack of confidence in the government's numbers, of course, and according to many experts, you should err on ENAG's side. But something that is not in dispute is lira's abysmal performance. The lira hit another record low of 18.24 to $1 this week, as the currency markets are still feeling the central bank's interest rate cut from last month, not to mention what's coming down the pipes from the Fed. And it looks like it's going to be a tough time for the lira yet again. Here are the details.
The Turkish Statistical Institute released the CPI numbers for August. According to the government numbers, the CPI was up 1.46% in August, now topping 80.2%. This time last year, the TSI had reported inflation at 11.7%, resulting in a nearly 70% increase in the last 12 months. The highest annual increase was seen in transportation at 116%, followed by home goods at 92%, and food prices at over 90%. By contrast, the numbers from the independent inflation research group ANOG indicated that the CPI increased 5.8% this month and topped 181%. According to ANOG, the lion's shares of the monthly increase in the CPI stem from goods and services at 23.7%, 10 times higher than the numbers reported by TSI. The inflation rate pertaining to goods and services is further exacerbated by the surging energy prices. In the last 12-month period alone, Turkey has seen a 399% rise in power prices, hitting industrial sectors the hardest. In addition, the lira was at a record low this week at 18.24 to a dollar in anticipation of the Fed's benchmark hike and the European Central Bank raising the rates by 75 basis points. The Fed is also expected to raise the rates 0.75% up to 3 to 3.25% benchmark.
And with that, that's it for us on This Week in Turkey. I have been Murat Türsan. Special thanks to Mehmet Tanverdi for news text and Kathleen Phelps for voiceovers. And folks, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe and support us on Patreon if you can. And thank you for joining us.